Hey, it's Geraldine. As a major 80s music lover, here are 15 essential albums you should have in your record collection. Disclaimer, I'm a massive new wave slash synth pop lover, so this list will definitely cater towards that. But I still think these are albums you should have in your record collection. Please let me know if these are on your list. Let's start. In no particular order, first, I have the Human League's album Dare. This is from 1981. This is definitely a new wave staple. It has one of the biggest hits that came out of the 80s, Don't You Want Me? This album is pretty synth heavy. Even though this album has that massive hit that is surprisingly put at the end of the track listing, this has so many other great songs that I love. My favorite track on this is probably Love Action, I Believe in Love, because that song is super duper catchy. I of course also love Don't You Want Me. It also has Seconds, Darkness, The Things That Dreams Are Made Of, just all great songs that you should definitely check out. Next, I have Tears for Fears album Songs from the Big Chair. This was released in 1985 and it just had its 40th anniversary a few days ago. We're continuing with the synth, but this is more pop oriented. Out of all the records that I showed today, this is probably the one that you should get first if you don't have any. It has massive hits like Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Head Over Heels, and Shout. This album really made them the 80s icons that they are. I think this is a perfect album all the way through. Some of my other favorites are Listen, as well as Mother's Talk. If you've never given this a full complete listen, I definitely recommend. Next, I have Talking Heads, Speaking in Tongues. This was released in 1983. This is my favorite Talking Heads album. Like the previous albums I shared, I think this album is perfect all the way through. This definitely stands out more as a more funky album because it blends a whole bunch of funk with new wave, which is very interesting, but it sounds amazing. It had two major hits, Burning Down the House and This Must Be the Place, and I freaking love that song so much. I will never ever get enough of it. Even beyond the hits, every single song on this is super danceable and just a really fun listen. Some of my other favorites on here are Making Flippy Floppy, Girlfriend is Better, Slippery People, Pull Up the Roots. I'm literally listing every single song because it's so good. Next, I have Depeche Mode. This is Some Great Reward. This was released in 1984, and this video wouldn't be an 80s video if I didn't have Depeche Mode here. And honestly, any of their albums could have been here, but this is the first one that I got on vinyl, and I feel like this is the first one you should get on vinyl. This is when they started sounding a little bit more darker. It was still synth pop fused with a little bit of industrial. You can see that in the songs Master and Servant. Definitely the big hits are People Are People, Blasphemous Rumors, Master and Servant, like I just mentioned. They're definitely experimenting a little bit more with their sound, and I feel like if I listened to this back then, I would be very not shocked, but intrigued by what I was hearing. But yes, this is one you should definitely own. So now for some pop, here is Cyndi Lauper's album She's So Unusual. This was released in 1983, and I think this album really encapsulates who Cyndi Lauper is as a person because it's so quirky and eclectic, and that is just how she is. Another album that I think is perfect all the way through. Of course, it has the big hits Girls Just Wanna Have Fun and Time After Time, but this is a super duper fun album to listen to. My favorite song on this is probably When You Were Mine, which is a cover of a Prince track, and I think it's so good. Definitely one you should have in your collection. Next, I have Billy Idol's album Rebel Yell. This was released in 1983. Just how the previous album that I just shared really showed Cyndi's personality, this one also shows Billy's whole persona. Of course, has the hit Rebel Yell and Eyes Without a Face, which is such a beautiful song. Other favorites are Blue Highway as well as Flesh for Fantasy. Definitely an album to play super loud and listen to that crazy guitar work that Steve Stevens provides. Next, we had to include something by the New Romantics, so I have Duran Duran's Rio. This was released in 1982. It's definitely synth pop with a lot of funky bass lines, which I love. You can really see that in Rio. And the music really makes you feel like you're in a movie. This has the major hits Rio, Hungry Like the Wolf, Save a Prayer, which really cemented them into super duper star status. Definitely an album defining the 80s that you should definitely own. Next, for another super duper pop album, we have Wham's Make It Big. This was released in 1984. A lot of hits on here like Wake Me Up Before You Go, Everything She Wants, and of course Careless Whisper. Those are some major tracks to have on here. I also really love Heartbeat and Freedom on this. Just has perfect pop songs that you should have in your collection. Next, I have Roxy Roxy Music's album Avalon. This was released in 1982 and it is Roxy Music's last album that they put out. It's like a sophistopop, art pop, very smooth with a lot of saxophone in there. It has one of the greatest tracks from the 80s, More Than This, but of course it also has Avalon, which is also another amazing track. Another song I really love is A Space Between. Every single song is pretty like chill and very pleasant to listen to, so definitely an album to like wind down to. I think Roxy Music really ended their catalog with a great finish. Next, for one of my favorite albums of all time, and that is The Queen is Dead by the Smiths. This was released in 1986. Definitely a major landmark indie rock album. There's something just magical with the combination of Morrissey's like witty lyricism and melancholy voice with Johnny Marr's jangly guitar and like super interesting riffs that make this a perfect album. I can never get enough of this album. I love every single track on here. It of course has the major hit, There's a Light That Never Goes Out. I love that song so much, but some more favorites for me. One of my favorite songs ever, Cemetery Gates and The Queen is Dead, I Know It's Over, The Boy with a Thorn in His Side. All great tracks. If you've never given this a full listen, please do. Next, I have Alphaville's album Forever Young. This was released in 1984. This has some more huge hits from the 80s. It has Forever Young as well as Big in Japan. Those songs are like decade defining anthems, and it's just a very great synth pop album fully. It's one of my favorite albums in my collection. I love the song Sounds Like a Melody. Definitely check that out if you've never listened to that. And I also love the song Lies. But if you really love the 80s, you should definitely have this in your collection. Next, I have Upstairs at Eric's by Yaz or Yazoo. This was released in 1982. This is a mix of synth pop with some amazing soulful vocals. The synths are pretty minimalist in this record. This album had some big hits like Don't Go, Situation, and Only You. And two of those are like super duper danceable and very synthesizer danceable tracks. If you've never listened to the full thing, I definitely recommend. One song that I really love is Bad Connection. Definitely check that out if you've never listened to that. Next, I have some Oingo Boingo. This is their album Dead Man's Party. This was released in 1985. I am a huge Oingo Boingo fan, so of course there was gonna be one in this video. But if you had to have one album, it'd definitely be this one. This is a mix of like ska, rock, and new wave all in one with like a very dark theatrical voice that Danny Elfman has. So it makes for a very interesting sounding record. It's like a whole bunch of like horns, very driven with horns, has very like interesting themes that are being sung about. It has three pretty big hits, Just Another Day, Dead Man's Party, and Weird Science, but every single song on this is very good. My favorite is probably Stay, and I also love No One Lives Forever. If you've never listened to this full thing, please check it out. Next, I have a Flock of Seagulls debut album. It is self-titled from 1982. This one's definitely different from all the albums I'm sharing because this one's more of like a spacey, futuristic synth album. It literally has a song titled Space Age Love Song, which is one of their hits on here, which I love so much, as well as the even bigger hit I Ran, So Far Away. But all the other tracks are also very great as well, that still have that like sci-fi theme going on. I love the song Messages as well as Telecommunication. I really love listening to this record. And lastly, I have Echo and the Bunnymen's album Ocean Rain, which was released in 1984. This is like a post-punk masterpiece. It's definitely more orchestral than all the other albums I've shared here. It really builds like a very like dark, melancholy atmosphere throughout all these tracks. This, of course, has the big hit, The Killing Moon. Whenever I think of that song, I think of the movie Donnie Darko, and I feel like this whole album captures the like the aura of that whole movie. This is a great album to listen to beyond just that hit. I love the song Silver, Crystal Days, The Killing Moon, Seven Seas. Definitely check this one out if you've never listened to it. So those were the 15 albums I think are essential for your 80s vinyl record collection. Before I end this video, I wanted to shout out a couple of notable albums that I wanted to mention in this video, but I couldn't because I actually don't have them on vinyl yet, and I hope to get those soon. So this wouldn't be an 80s video if I didn't mention Pet Shop Boys. You should definitely get Please on vinyl. I need to get that, please. Of course, my favorite band of all time, New Order. I was actually going to include Substance 1987 of New Order here, but that one doesn't really count because it's a compilation album of their singles. But if you were going to get a New Order album, you should definitely get Power, Corruption, and Lies or Low Life. Both are very great. And then, lastly, I need to mention The Cure, of course. So you should definitely get Disintegration or Head on the Door first. And those were all the albums I think you should have in your record collection for the 80s. So those were all the records I picked. Please let me know if you agree with me or if I'm missing some to this list. So that was the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like. And if you would like to see more of my content, definitely make sure to subscribe. And if you would like to see more of me on the regular, I post over on TikTok and Instagram about vinyl and hi-fi all the time. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.